Hi, I'm Ben from Crompton Partners, and this video is on landlords' legal rights in Abu Dhabi. We're talking about termination, maintenance, and other useful aspects. The relationship between landlords and tenants is still governed by Law 20 of 2006. Very important law for these purposes, and we're going to get them, and we've been through that law, and we're going to take about 11 points from that. This is an introductory video. We've got a much more detailed guide. You want that guide, please email us at guides@CP Estate Agents. Okay, number one. Preparing a property for move-in. There's no legal obligation to clean and repaint the property. However, it is best practice, but understand it's not in the law. Same with pest control. Repairs and maintenance. Very important. Article 7 states that the landlord is responsible for maintenance of property, but for all maintenance except something called tenant maintenance, right? It's not clear what tenant maintenance is, so we would recommend in your tenancy contract that you have a definition of what the landlord is responsible for and what the tenant is responsible for, as well, as most disputes come out of maintenance. Okay, number 3, tenant's use of the property. What is a tenant allowed to use the property for? The law states that the property is to be used as agreed. So make sure in your tenancy contract you state that it can only be used as a family dwelling. Number 4, assignment and subletting. A lot of people get confused about this. The tenant can actually sublet the property with the landlord's permission. So again, not something to worry about, but you can give permission for the subletting. If you don't, obviously they're not allowed to. Number 5, very important. If you are buying a property with a tenant in it, you need to take a look at the tenancy contract, because it will bind you once you bought it as if you signed it. Okay, so make sure you have a look at it, or you could be exposing yourself to a lot of liability. Tenant's alterations. What can the tenant do to alter the property? The tenant can do anything to the property as long as it doesn't cause damage. If it causes damage, they'll need the landlord's permission. So an interesting case would be, let's say, building a shed in the garden. Presumably it's not going to cause damage to the property, so the tenant doesn't need the landlord's permission. Number 7, rent increases and decreases. Very important. Article 20. If you want to raise or decrease the rent, you need to give 2 months notice to the tenant before the end of the contract before the end of the contract. So in a falling market, obviously landlords don't have to worry about this too much because they prefer the rent to stay as it is. So if you miss that deadline, it will renew on the current rent. In a rising market, it's very important that you get in that notice, because if you don't, then you'll be stuck with the same year's rent again. Number 8, varying the lease. Checks. You still need to give that 2 months notice. So even it comes in particularly important if you've bought a property and you want to put in your own lease, you need to give the tenant 2 months notice, because you're going to be changing their tenancy terms. Non-renewal. If you don't want to renew the lease, again, you need to give 2 months notice before the end. You can't just wait for it to run out and assume that it won't renew. You need to give notice of non-renewal. Number 10, terminating the lease early. According to Article 23, the lease lasts for its term, so most leases have got a year's term on them. If you as a landlord want to terminate early, you can only do so with the agreement of the tenant, and unless they have breached the tenancy contract in some way, haven't paid their rent, done a couple of the violations which are in the law, then you can terminate. Otherwise, it's with the agreement of the tenant only. Number 11, giving back the property. The tenant needs to give back the property at the end of the tenancy contract. Otherwise, they're liable for the rent and ADC bills afterwards. And of course, if they fail to pay the rent, you'll need to evict them. So there's 11 points on landlords' legal rights. Please ask for or download our guide, and that will give you a much greater insight into your position as an Abu Dhabi landlord.